My mother-in-law clinked her wine glass, smiled at the entire table and said, "Let's be honest, Derek married down. We all know she's not exactly the brightest." Derek laughed. My own husband laughed. Everyone stared at me, waiting for me to crumble. But they had no idea what I'd been carrying in my purse all night. My name is Renata. I'm 34 years old, and this is the story of how my husband and his mother called me dumb at Christmas dinner, and how I exposed them both in front of everyone they were trying to impress. I work as an administrative assistant at a mid-sized accounting firm. It's not glamorous. Nobody writes articles about what I do. I handle spreadsheets, filing, scheduling, payroll processing. The kind of work that keeps an entire office running but that people forget even exists. I'm invisible in the best way and the worst way at the same time. I married Derek 5 years ago. He came from a family that owned a small but profitable chain of dry cleaning businesses. 3 locations across the city. Nothing massive, but enough to make them feel important. His mother, Lorraine, ran the family the way a CEO runs a company. She ranked everyone by their usefulness. If you didn't bring money, connections, or status to the table, you were furniture to her. And I was the cheapest chair in the room. I grew up in a blue-collar household. My dad drove a delivery truck. My mom worked the front desk at a dentist's office. I was the first person in my entire family to graduate from college. I was proud of that. But Derek's family never let me forget that I wasn't their kind of people. To them, my degree was cute. My job was forgettable. And I was just the girl Derek settled for. For 5 years, I shrank myself at every family gathering. I laughed off the little jabs. I swallowed my pride when Lorraine made comments about my clothes, my cooking, my background. I told myself it was worth it to keep the peace, to keep my marriage together, to be the bigger person. But here's the thing about me that none of them ever bothered to learn. I wasn't wealthy. I didn't come from status. But I had something Lorraine and Derek never counted on. I pay attention. I notice everything. And I remember every single word. If you've ever sat at a table where people made you feel small, where you smiled through insults just to keep the peace, subscribe to this channel right now. I want to hear your story in the comments. You're not alone in this. Let's go. It was Christmas Eve, Lorraine's house. 12 family members gathered around a long dining table covered in white linen and expensive candles. The whole place smelled like roasted lamb and pine needles from the massive tree in the corner. Catered food lined the sideboard. Bottles of wine that cost more than my weekly groceries sat open and breathing. This was Lorraine's annual power display. Everything had to be perfect, and everything had to remind you that she was the one paying for it. I had spent 3 weeks preparing a homemade dessert. A layered trifle from my grandmother's recipe. Vanilla custard, fresh berries, sponge cake soaked in a little bit of amaretto. My grandmother used to make it every holiday, and it was the one tradition I carried with me from my family into this one. I was genuinely proud of it. I walked in holding that glass dish like it meant something, because it did. When I set it on the dessert table, Lorraine walked over, looked down at it, and said loudly enough for everyone to hear, "Oh, how quaint. I suppose not everyone can afford to order from a real bakery." Derek's sisters, Whitney and Brooke, laughed from across the room. Light, easy laughter. Like it was nothing. Like I was nothing. I brushed it off. I sat down. I folded my napkin in my lap and I kept my face neutral. The conversation shifted to the family business. Lorraine was in her element now. She started talking about expansion plans. 2 new locations, bigger revenue, projections. She used words like scaling and market positioning, while gesturing with her wine glass like she was presenting to investors. Then she turned to me. She put her hand on mine, patted it gently, and said, "You wouldn't understand any of this, sweetheart. Business isn't really your area. I looked at Derek. He was sitting right beside me. He could have said anything. He could have said, "Mom, that's enough." He could have changed the subject. Instead, he nodded and said, "Mom's right, babe. You're great at other stuff. Just not this." He said it casually, like he was stating a fact, like the sky is blue, like Renata is dumb. Then Lorraine lifted her glass and delivered the line that changed everything. "I told Derek before the wedding, 'You're a sweet girl, Renata.' But let's be honest, he married down. We all see it." The table went quiet. Derek's Aunt Linda, who had always been a little kinder than the rest of them, looked at Derek and asked softly, "Derek, aren't you going to say something?" Derek shrugged. He actually shrugged. And then he said, "I mean, Mom's not wrong. Renata knows she's not the brains of this family. Right, babe?" He looked at me, waiting, expecting me to nod along, to agree with my own humiliation like I always did. The clink of silverware stopped. I could hear the grandfather clock ticking in the hallway. My face was burning. My hands were shaking under the table where no one could see them. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I looked down at my plate, took one breath, and said quietly, "Okay." But inside, something broke. No, something shifted. Something locked into place. That was the moment I stopped trying to earn their respect and started planning to earn something else entirely. The truth. 2 weeks after that Christmas dinner, I was sitting at our kitchen table going through the household budget. I had always handled the small bills: electric, groceries, subscriptions. Derek insisted on managing the big picture, finances. He said it made more sense that way. I never questioned it because I trusted him. That morning, I happened to open our joint savings account online. I was checking the balance to plan a car repair. And that's when I saw it. Transfer after transfer after transfer. Money going out in chunks. 5,000 here, 8,000 there, 12,000 in a single transaction in October. Over the past year, more than $40,000 had been moved out of our joint savings. Every transfer went to the same place: Lorraine's business account. My chest tightened. I called Derek at work. I kept my voice calm. I asked him about the transfers. He sighed like I was bothering him and said, "You don't understand business, Renata. Mom needed capital for the expansion. I'll pay it back." I said, "You moved $40,000 of our money without telling me." He said, "Why are you even looking at the bank statements? Just let me handle the money stuff." I said, "Because it's our money, Derek." And he said without hesitating, "Technically, most of it's mine." I hung up the phone. I stared at the screen, and I started taking screenshots of everything. 3 weeks later, the second blow came: Lorraine's birthday brunch, a fancy restaurant downtown. About 30 people were there, family and friends, all celebrating the Queen. After the meal, Lorraine stood up and made an announcement. She was gifting each of her 3 children a formal share in the dry cleaning business. Derek got his. Whitney got hers. Brooke got hers. Everyone clapped. Then Lorraine looked at me, smiled wide, and said, "And Renata, honey, I got you a gift card to that cooking class downtown. Maybe you can finally learn to make something edible." The room erupted in laughter. Derek smirked into his champagne glass. He didn't look at me. He didn't need to. The message was clear. I wasn't family. I was entertainment. As people mingled after the toast, I walked toward the restroom and passed Whitney talking to a cousin near the bar. She didn't see me. She whispered, "I honestly don't know why he stays with her. She brings nothing to this family." I kept walking. My heels clicked on the marble floor. I didn't stop. I didn't flinch. The third betrayal was the one that nearly broke me. I tried one more time. I sat Derek down in our living room and told him we needed to talk about our marriage, about the money, about the way his family treated me. He listened for about 2 minutes. Then he said, "You're being paranoid. My mom loves you. You're just insecure because you didn't grow up with what we had." He told me Lorraine had actually suggested couples therapy. She had even recommended someone, a therapist named Dr. Weston. He said it would help me work through my sensitivity. I went, I tried. I sat on that leather couch twice a week and opened up about my feelings, my childhood, my fears. I thought it was safe. Then, 3 weeks into therapy, I was at a family dinner and Lorraine said, "Renata, I heard you've been feeling inadequate since childhood. That must be so hard." She said it with a sympathetic tilt of her head. The exact words I had used in session. Word for word. The therapist was Lorraine's friend. She had been feeding everything back to her. I stopped going to therapy the next day. Derek called me difficult. Lorraine told him I was resisting help. They all nodded along like I was the problem. So I stopped talking. I stopped arguing. I stopped reacting. And I started documenting. Every bank transfer. Every conversation. Every date. Every amount. Every insult. I built a file on my laptop and I updated it every single night after Derek fell asleep. They thought my silence meant submission. It didn't. It meant I was gathering everything I needed. What none of them knew, what none of them ever thought to wonder about, was what I actually did at work every day. They heard administrative assistant and pictured someone answering phones and fetching coffee. But my job at that accounting firm had trained me in one very specific and very dangerous skill. I knew how to read financial documents the way most people read novels. I could spot an inconsistency in a spreadsheet from 3 rows away. I tracked numbers for a living, and I was extremely good at it. Over the past 3 months, I had been going through the bank transfers Derek made to Lorraine's business. At first, I was just tracking our stolen savings. But then I noticed something else. The numbers didn't match. The amounts Derek sent didn't line up with the business reports Lorraine was bragging about at family dinners. There were payments going to accounts I didn't recognize. Shell companies with vague names and no clear purpose. Expense reports that were inflated by thousands. I pulled tax filings. I compared them to the revenue numbers Lorraine casually mentioned in front of family. They were wildly different. What I found was that Lorraine's business had been committing tax fraud for at least 3 years. Inflated expenses, underreported income, fake invoices from vendors that didn't seem to exist. And Derek's transfers were part of the funnel, money flowing in through personal accounts to avoid proper reporting. I found email chains between Lorraine and her accountant discussing how to restructure the numbers before filing season. I printed them. I saved copies of bank statements, invoices, and transaction logs. I put it all on an encrypted USB drive and I placed a backup in a safety deposit box at a bank across town. They called me dumb. They said I didn't understand business. But I understood numbers better than any of them. And the numbers told a story they never wanted anyone to read. I hadn't decided when to use it, but I knew the moment would come. And when it did, I wouldn't need to raise my voice. There was one person who noticed that something was wrong with me long before I was ready to talk about it. My boss, Gloria Whitfield. She was a sharp, no-nonsense CPA who had built the firm from the ground up. Gloria didn't do small talk. She didn't do gossip. But she paid attention to her people, and she had been watching me come into work with red eyes and a tight jaw for months. One afternoon in late February, I was sitting in the break room staring at my coffee when Gloria walked in, closed the door behind her, and sat down across from me. She didn't say, "Are you okay?" because she could see I wasn't. She just said, "Talk to me." I didn't tell her everything. I couldn't, but I told her enough. I told her about Derek, about the money, about what I had been finding in the financial records. Gloria listened without interrupting. She folded her hands on the table and let me finish. When I was done, she said, "Renata, you're one of the most detail-oriented people I've ever hired. If you found what you think you found, you need a forensic accountant and a very good lawyer. I know both." Within a week, Gloria had connected me with David Chen, a top divorce attorney with a reputation for winning cases that involved hidden assets and financial misconduct. David reviewed my evidence over 2 long meetings. He went through every document, every email, every transfer record. When he was finished, he looked at me and said, "This is real. The fraud is real, and your husband's involvement could make him legally liable. You have leverage most people in your situation would kill for, but timing is everything." I nodded. I understood. I would wait. Meanwhile, the family was more arrogant than ever. Lorraine had started planning a massive grand opening gala for her 2 new dry cleaning locations. It was going to be the event of the season. A rented banquet hall. Local press invited. Business partners. Even a couple of city council members on the guest list. Lorraine told Derek to make sure I dressed appropriately and didn't embarrass the family. Derek relayed the message to me that night in bed. He said it like he was reading from a grocery list. No shame at all. A few days later, Whitney called me directly. Her voice was sweet and sharp at the same time. "Just stand in the back and smile, Renata. Nobody's coming to see you." I said, "Don't worry, Whitney. I'll be there." Lorraine was riding high. She was about to expand her little empire. Her son was loyal. Her daughters were obedient. And the daughter-in-law she despised was completely under control. Or so she thought. Lorraine was so busy building her throne that she never noticed I was quietly pulling out the foundation, 1 brick at a time. The night of the gala, the banquet hall was glowing. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling. Round tables covered in white linen and gold centerpieces filled the room. A banner behind the main stage read, "Lorraine's Legacy. Excellence in every detail." The sound of clinking glasses and polished laughter filled the air. About 80 people were there. Business owners, local reporters, investors, family friends. This was Lorraine's night, and she was making sure everyone knew it. Lorraine stood at the podium in a navy blue dress, her hair freshly styled, her smile wide and practiced. She gave a speech about family values, about integrity in business, about building something that lasts. Derek stood beside her, beaming like a sun in a campaign ad. Whitney and Brooke mingled with investors near the bar, laughing too loudly at jokes that weren't funny. I arrived 15 minutes into the speech. I didn't sneak in through the back. I walked through the front doors in a fitted black dress, my shoulders straight, my leather folder tucked under my arm. I chose a spot near the center of the room where everyone could see me. Lorraine spotted me from the stage. She leaned toward Derek and whispered something. I could read her lips. Make sure she doesn't say anything embarrassing. When Lorraine finished her speech, the crowd clapped. The MC invited people to raise their glasses for a toast. That's when I stepped forward. I walked toward the microphone. The room murmured. Lorraine looked surprised but amused. She tilted her head, smiled, and said into the mic, "Oh, this should be adorable. Go ahead, sweetheart." I took the microphone. I thanked the family for teaching me so much about business over the past 5 years. My voice was steady, calm, almost warm. Then I shifted. Since Lorraine loves to talk about integrity, I said, I thought I'd share some interesting numbers I found while her son was moving our savings into her company, without my knowledge. The room didn't gasp. It just went silent. The kind of silence that feels like the air has been sucked out of the building. I opened the leather folder. I didn't raise my voice. I read, calmly and clearly, Inflated expense reports totaling over $90,000 across 3 years. Payments to shell accounts with no legitimate vendors. Attached. Revenue numbers that didn't match what was filed with the IRS. Specific figures. Specific dates. Specific account numbers. Lorraine's face drained of color. Her hand gripped the edge of the podium. Derek stood up from his chair and said, "Renata, stop. You don't know what you're talking about." I looked at him. "Actually, Derek, I do. You told me I didn't understand business. But I understand fraud. And so does the forensic accountant who reviewed these files. And so does my attorney, who has already filed the necessary reports." I turned to Lorraine. "You spent 5 years calling me dumb. You humiliated me at every dinner table you own. But you never once thought to wonder what the dumb girl might notice when you handed her husband access to your books." Lorraine's mouth opened and closed. She grabbed Derek's arm. You can't, Derek. Do something!" Derek was pale. His hands were shaking. He couldn't speak. I noticed a reporter near the front row, quietly, writing in a notebook. Another one had her phone angled toward the podium. I closed the folder. I looked out at the room full of people who had once watched me be humiliated and said nothing. And I said, "Merry belated Christmas, Lorraine." I walked out through the front doors. David Chen was standing by his car in the parking lot, a manila envelope in his hand. Divorce paperwork. Already prepared. I signed on the hood of his car under the streetlight, and for the first time in 5 years, I could breathe. The fallout came fast. Within 2 weeks, the IRS opened a formal investigation into Lorraine's business. 2 of her 3 locations were frozen pending a full audit. The grand expansion she had celebrated that night was dead before it started. Derek was named as a co-signer on several of the fraudulent filings. His own attorney told him to cooperate fully or risk criminal charges. He was terrified. The man who told me I wasn't the brains of the family was now begging a lawyer to keep him out of prison. The divorce was finalized within 3 months. David Chen made sure I received my full share of our marital assets, plus restitution for the funds Derek had transferred without my consent. Every dollar was accounted for. Every receipt was documented. Because that's what the dumb girl does. She keeps records. Lorraine's reputation in the community was destroyed. The same people who laughed at my grandmother's trifle were now whispering about her tax problems at cocktail parties. The same business partners who shook her hand at the gala quietly cut ties. Whitney called me one evening, crying. She asked me to make it stop. I listened for a moment, and then I said, "You told me to stand in the back and smile. I'm done standing in the back." I moved into my own apartment that spring. Small, clean, quiet. Mine. Gloria promoted me to senior administrative coordinator. She took me to dinner to celebrate, and over 2 glasses of red wine, she said, "I always knew you had it in you." They spent years convincing me I was nothing. But the thing about being underestimated, it gives you time. And I used every second of it. If someone in your life made you feel stupid, a spouse, a parent, an in-law, and you had to sit there and take it, I see you. I was you. Subscribe to this channel and tell me your story in the comments below. You are not dumb. You are not small. And your silence doesn't mean you're weak. And thank you for listening to my story. If it moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe if you haven't already. And remember, your worth is not determined by the people who failed to see it. It's determined by what you do when you finally see it yourself.